Shalom Kulam. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the premature Ephraimite exodus. While the children of Israel were in Egypt for about 210 years, leading up to the exodus under Moses, there's many things that transpired, many unconventional truths that most people are not aware of, things that went on that happened. The Egyptians had commissioned them to build many canals and even pyramids, not the biggest ones, but some of the smaller ones. And Josephus records this. They had, where they're positioned in Goshen, they actually were a buffer for the Egyptian armies, so that when any oncoming enemies would seek to invade Egypt, they would first have to go through the Israelites in Goshen, from the east, north, and southeast. And so they often fought alongside the Egyptians while they're in Egypt. Regarding the premature Ephraimite exodus, the Rabbins talk about that about 30 years prior to the exodus under Moses, there was a band of Israelites that left Egypt early. And they, in hopes of making it into the promised land, reclaiming the promised land, and conquering the enemy opposing forces of Israel, enemies of Israel. Well, the event was actually a tragedy. There were about 200,000 that left, them and their families, 200,000 altogether, about 30,000 soldiers. And they, to be blunt, they lost the battle and they all died, except for a remaining few. One of these remaining few was a young man by the name of Hoshea, who was later called Joshua. The Rabbins say it was 30 years prior to. I believe that this event actually happened about 20 years prior to the Exodus under Moses. And I talk about it in this article. Their leader that led them, he was an Ephraimite general whose name was Canaan. Others call him, the Rabbins call him Canaan. He has a couple of different names, but what's interesting is Joshua, we see in the record of his genealogy that he was Joshua's son of Nun, Yahushua ben Nun. And so we see the Nun on the end of, Nun was one of his fathers, his forefathers. And it so happens that this Ganun, has that Nun at the end of his name. And so I believe that there is a familial connection here, that this Ephraimite general, this charismatic leader who led the Israelites early, these Ephraimites, and they followed after him to their doom, that this, I pose to you, was Joshua's father or grandfather, but I believe it was his father, more likely. Joshua was about 22 years old by the time this happened. And he actually I believe that he was in that war, and he was one of the remaining few that survived. And so, like father, like son, he rectified, he made tikkun for the loss that his father had done. And so Yah had chosen him to lead Israel, also from the tribe of Ephraim. He led Israel into the land of Canaan successfully about 60 years later. History has a funny way of repeating itself in rhymes and in rhythms. In this article I'd submitted, this scholastic work, I talk about how that a lot of these events that happened leading up to the Exodus under Moses and shortly following, that they will also play over again in the latter days. And it's very strange how this works, but it's the Father's design. His miraculous hand has been through the beginning and will be through the end of time. And so he chooses to work mysteriously like that, in patterns and repetitions of history. So I pose to you that this event and other events leading up to it will parallel at the end of time through the second Exodus, and certain individuals and events that will transpire through the tribe of Ephraim. I believe this article that is submitted, I believe it to be one of the most in-depth studies on the subject. I use a lot of Midrash Rabbim, the Milkilta, a lot of the ancient Jewish texts, the Targumim, and a lot of pseudepigraphical literature, and Book of Jasher. Use a lot of historians, some Jewish scholars, Christian scholars, and kind of go at it from every angle possible and kind of get a more fuller idea of what went on. You know, this event, this premature Ephraimite exodus that took place, it feels that I have a strange affinity with them, with these Ephraimites that died, which is why I guess I felt so compelled to write so exhaustively on the subject. Nevertheless, I hope it blesses you. I talk about the Israelites building, being the guardians of Egypt during that time, and building pyramids and battling giants and all kinds of really strange and deranged historical events. You can check out the link below and download a free copy on the link in Academia. And I hope it blesses you. Shalom. Bye-bye.